So as you're making your way in, obviously you've all had a lovely conference today at DevOpsDays. Hands up if you've been to DevOpsDays today. Keep your hand up if you enjoyed yourself. And thank you to the regular Doxlon crowd that have come down to make up the numbers as well. Your attendance is much appreciated. Obviously, DevOpsDays is a really lovely time to get together with friends and colleagues that you might not have seen for a little while. And I can appreciate those booths at the back look like lovely places to have a little private chat. Your chat is then interfering with other people's listening of the panel. If you would like to have a conversation with some long-lost friends, there's a bar upstairs. Feel free to go and use it. If the people down here are sticking to the panel conversation, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So let me introduce myself. My name's Chris. I am your moderator and compere for the evening. I've spent my career doing a great many roles. I started telling people what I thought DevOps was back in 2010. I did some very early stage Doxlon presentations for Tony and crew. And after a 10-year hiatus where I was client side working out it's really much harder than just standing on a stage and talking about it. I'm now back working for a managed service provider called 6 Degrees. And I run their products and tech function. I'm responsible for their roadmap and their engineering capabilities. But we're not here to listen to me. We're here to listen to our amazing panel. So if you could all encourage them onto the stage with a massive round of applause, we'll bring them on. So, a few points of housekeeping and order. It would not be a meetup event without a thank you to our sponsors. So, on behalf of GitLab, Adaptavist, and of course Linux Recruit, thank you very much for the beers and the pizzas, it's much appreciated, and also this lovely venue in central London. And just to really make Linux Recruit feel bad, actually there's prizes on offer, so hopefully you've had a chance to enter the competition for JBL speakers and a Meta Quest. We will be announcing the winner of that competition straight after the panel, so please do stick around even if our chat is totally boring. So without further ado, I will allow each of the speakers to introduce themselves and then we'll kick off the conversation. So if we move from closest to me to furthest away, you want to just take a quick minute to introduce yourself?
So, I'm Christoph. I'm a channel solution architect with GitLab. So I hope you have enjoyed the pizza and beer. My role is to educate partners like Adaptavist using GitLab and developing services with GitLab, and I'm based out of Stuttgart in Germany.
My name is Lubna, Essa, and I work in a company called Wise, and I'm a lead product engineer. What that means is I work with external banks and financial institutions to help them on board with the services of Wise, liaising with internal engineering teams in the company. Prior to that, I was at Google, London office as well, working in an advertisement team. And Google has its beautiful set of custom tools for building, testing, deploying, all of that stuff, which was quite fun. And Google also has, I'm sure a lot of you know, this distinction between SREs and SWEs. So we can get into that a little bit more later. Before Google, I was also at Amazon for a few years, working with subsidiaries of Amazon. So I don't know if you might have heard of like Book Depository or Woot or Amazon Fresh or many of these. So I was working with them, helping them sort of sort out their monitoring systems as well. But yeah, and Amazon also has a beautiful set of custom tools, so we'll get into that later.
Cheers, thanks Lubna. Hi, I'm Rashi Saxena. I'm heading the DevOps space in a program called New Acquiring Platform in a company called WorldPay. I hope you've heard about that. I'm also delivery manager for a couple of applications, so I actually got a chance to marry DevOps practices with some actual real job. This is what my colleagues told me. DevOps is still a buzzword. People ask us, maybe we would get into that controversy in a bit. But unlike Lubna, I think I'm born and brought up in this company, looks like. I've been working for WorldPay for quite some time. I don't know if they love me or I do, but it is working quite well. Not even a single day I felt my job is monotonous. So yeah, that's me pretty much. Thank you, and lovely audience, by the way. Yeah, cool.
Awesome. Cool. I'm Jason Spriggs. I'm a consulting team lead at Adaptavist. I'm based out of the Washington, D.C. area, so I'm a little jet-lagged. My apologies. Prior to Adaptavist, I was working in the DevOps space at a variety of startups across the Washington, D.C. area, doing things normally, more technical, but always in some way, shape, or form tied to a practice that isn't intrinsically technical, so manufacturing, sometimes physical security, things along those lines. So a wide variety of stuff there. Yep.
So for reasons that only I can understand, because I'm belligerent and bloody-minded, I'm going to persist with this technology. I think if I don't move the microphone will like me. So we'll pass the wired mic down that end, and I will just give this the magic touch, and we'll hope it works. So we've got an amazing panel. We've got some fantastic questions. We're talking about the future of DevOps. If I'm being totally honest, when I spoke to Tony about putting this event together, I actually wanted to ask the question, is DevOps dead? But apparently that doesn't work with DevOpsDays trying to have... with DevOpsDays trying to have lots and lots of future conferences. It still has to be... Fuck. I give up. It has to be called DevOpsDays, so we can't say that DevOps is dead. But we can agree maybe it's changed and evolved a little bit from what it originally was. So to get this panel warmed up, the first question that I wanted to go to, and we'll start with Rashi, is how has DevOps changed since the original view from OG DevOps with Patrick Dubois back in 2009? What's happened and what's evolved?
Thank you. I think it has evolved significantly from when it started. Starting from the fact that how DevOps was coined to bridge the gap between devs and operations, and as everyone says, to a point when we actually ended up creating another silo called DevOps. So we wanted to kill those silos, but then ended up creating another team in the companies, to a point now when it has emerged to rather use the core concepts of DevOps intrinsically in the teams, like right from continuous integration to deployments to deliveries to monitoring now, focusing on faster feedback loops, understanding what does our customer want really, and then optimizing that flow for them. And that could take pretty much everything, right from conception to delivery. So it could be right from understanding how are you branching your code, to what kind of tools are you using? Are you using nice standards? And when I say nice, again, it sort of varies. People get hung up on continuous integration and pipelines and Jenkins and all that stuff only when it comes to DevOps. However, it is far beyond that. To a point now when DevSecOps have emerged as well. So if you ask me from the OG DevOps, I think we have come a long way, to a point when actually people understand what DevOps is, the core concepts of it, the foundations of it, and not just treating that as a buzzword. Let's just set up a DevOps team. Let's just get some DevOps engineers. Not really, and it is a mindset. It was always a philosophy more than the tools and the standards, and I think that has started to get absorbed in the teams and in the companies. So I think it has come a long way and have significantly changed.
So from my perspective, I see a lot of companies picking up DevOps these days by just choosing a tool like GitLab for their work, and they learn about DevOps afterwards. So it's a lot of training, and these are companies like public customers, these are companies like automotive companies, they are now software companies, and they need to adopt, so they start learning about DevOps and using tools accordingly.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think I would just add that back in the days, many years ago, there was this things like host.txt where someone would go in and add a host, and then that would be the load balancer, right? And then we actually had like load balancers as like services, and then somebody came up with this, okay, now we're going to do the containers, and then it's like, okay, now we need a Docker. Okay, no, actually we need a zookeeper as well, and then all of that Kubernetes and everything. So because these DevOps have been done so well that there are so many tools and sort of a lot of tools for a lot of people to use. So now it's almost a bit confusing. Be like, okay, the person who deploys all these clusters, what do we call them? Do we still call them DevOps, or should we call them platform engineers? And I think that's where things starts to change a little bit, and then the terminologies get a bit confusing at that point as well. But yeah, there has been.
Sorry, that's fine. So I'm going to come to you, Jason, because I've got a difficult question for the consultant to answer. So we've had a range of answers here, right? So Rashi's saying that the view of DevOps is a broad church, everything fits under it. It's really hard for a leader like me to go and invest in something, because if we go back to original DevOps, we're talking about kind of cams and calms. As soon as you mention culture, that is a bottomless pit of money that I can't then put anything into. So we've then had counter views that talk a lot about technology and all the different things and tools you can use to drive adoption. So Jason, have we made this term too broad for it to mean anything at all?
Well, unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you on that. The trick with DevOps, and this was actually an issue that I ran into probably about 6 years ago, is that I had a team lead that came in and was trying to sort of push DevOps from the technical side, but also didn't have the people side as a part of that equation. So they were focused very much on the developer side without really queuing in the operations side, but wanted to go about that change in a way that basically siloed out the ops side, which at that point is cool if you maybe want to go fast, but you're going to step on a lot of toes in that same sense. So leaving out that side certainly is not great for making friends, which you sort of need for buy-in. So as far as the term sort of being too broad, I do agree with that. And thankfully, I think most folks recognize that DevOps has become a very wide term, and SRE and platform engineer and DevSecOps are implementation strategies of DevOps, but I don't think at the core of it that DevOps has really faded at all. It's just become much more prevalent and wider to even non-technical people. So I think it's actually sort of made it stronger.
Do you have something to say?
No, okay. I think, in this era of AIs and machine learning, right, ChatGPT and stuff, I don't think so. It's tricky at all to become a technical engineer, okay? And don't get me wrong, I mean, everyone is doing a fab job there, just saying how it is easy to learn. Now we have got the access to all of these things. I still think it is very difficult to tackle the blocked mindsets, if you know what I mean, and that is where DevOps originated from, and that is still there, and that's why it is still prevalent, because the behavioral challenges, the mindset issues, cultural shifts, understanding that if something is changing, it's not going to take my job away. That understanding takes years, basically, and DevOps comes with that mindset and philosophy. As I keep saying, it's a collaboration, and it doesn't mean collaboration doesn't mean creating a Teams channel and then sort of collaborating and asking questions to and passing the baton from one team to another and taking that for a collaboration. Not really. It actually is a very deep concept, and that's why we need influencers and DevOps evangelists in the teams who basically can make that happen by educating people why the change is important, and by helping them with those tools, processes, techniques, challenges, bringing their challenges to a solution-oriented mindset room, and then solving their problems. So yeah, I think it can never die. I think it can only evolve into different versions. Yeah.
Rashi, you owe £3 to the swear box for GPT, AI, and evangelist.
Evangelist, yeah, I take that one actually.
So I think we're agreeing, right? The original definition of DevOps, it's taken legs, right? And that would be entirely normal and expected when you apply a community effect to a concept that everyone gets behind. The whole purpose of open source, the whole purpose of collaborative work is to allow it to improve by the collective experiences of each individual. So if DevOps has evolved and has become something bigger and something more complex, I guess the next question for our panel is, did we ever really do it properly before it moved on? Have we ever seen standout examples of people nailing that OG DevOps and getting it right? I remember going to some DevOps days back in the day, but what's the view of the panel? I want to go to Chris first.
I think, in my opinion, the journey is the destination. So it's not focusing on being DevOps or DevSecOps. It's important to have a common goal in the team and working in that direction together and with other teams. That's the important thing. It's not the destination.
Yeah, I think it very much depends on the scale of the companies, because we're not just talking about the UK, we're talking about tech companies across the world, and everyone has had their own style, and some of the smaller companies have had this one guy who knows everything to do with platform, DevOps, security, and infrastructure and everything. No one else knows anything about any of those topics. So there are examples like this, whereas some companies would be very much focused on doing all the good practices. I think it also depends on, because now we see this a lot of startups spinning up, and if the startup owner is a software engineer, then we would see a different style of technology going forward in that small company. Whereas if they are more marketing focused, and then it'd be like you said earlier, it takes years for someone to understand how important sort of DevOps is.
Yeah, I'd like to challenge this question actually. So I don't think so. There is a thing called, have we done DevOps better before, or did we really do DevOps before? I think we can never do full DevOps. Let's put it this way, because this is not a thing. It's about unlocking the different maturity levels of DevOps, and today an organization must be on their DevOps maturity level 2, and I think before 2000 would be on 0, because everyone was just doing the works in their silos, and one person was writing the code, another one was testing, another one was operating, and then there was no communication, collaboration, and then things used to just fall apart horribly. Has it fully changed in all of the organizations? Absolutely not. Even in one company, there'll be like different programs doing different kind of DevOps. So the maturity level is something I would say, has evolved and is changing. But even in 2060, would we be doing DevOps? I don't think so, because there'll be other things, and that's when I'd say that's how SRE was born, because there's another problem to unravel. After we have, in quotes, done DevOps, it's like, okay, now I think the dev side of DevOps probably has been taken care of, but there's still some problems on the right side of the paradigm. So, and that's how SRE was born, and that's how platform engineering, and there'll be another buzzwords in 10 years, but then overall, it's still in the broader range of DevOps framework itself, So I think if we ever get to do DevOps, then I think we are not evolving, if you know what I mean. So that means it's stalled, and I don't think so that would, it would not be, I don't think so I'm going to die if that happens. And then the second very, very quickly thing, I would say it's a problem agitated solution, right? The PaaS. So the problem was that it was taking ages for us to ship our code to production. And agitation was when it was just happening over and over again. And then the solution that was presented before 2000 was like one of the segments of DevOps. And then the solution kept on changing and kept on enhancing, and the different solutions came up, and that's how the practice was formed. And so it's ever stretching, in my opinion.
So this is a fascinating question. I've run into this issue actually at my last job, where we when I came in, the first thing that every developer, every DevOps person did day one was you had to have code running in prod by the end of your first day. That was the rule. And honestly, from the DevOps side, in my case, it was making a change, adding an environment variable to the production application, just something fairly benign. But gave you a good idea as far as that run through. About a year into that job, there was an internal effort to sort of shift towards doing a platform engineering side, not quite in the way that it's known today, but in a early onset version of what platform engineering is. And as a part of that, there was the sudden move to want to go to Kubernetes as a part of that. This company was previously using ECS, had fairly good Terraform pipelines and for actually doing their deployment, and it worked fairly well. The issue is that as a part of the move towards Kubernetes, we noticed that there was a very big disruption point and a time where we wanted to try to address a lot of technical debt by tearing up the rug and trying to plaster something new down. And that sort of ran into an issue where all of a sudden, if we had a new dev that wanted to be onboarded, not all of the developers inside of our organization even understood at that point what was going on in the system, because there was a new carpet trying to be brought down while there was one that was already there being torn up. And I think to some degree, there is a little bit of a concern within the DevOps space where the iterative approach is really easy to just bypass if you want to just put something brand new down. And I think that's an issue that sort of sometimes comes in and makes some of these movements from, yes, a DevOps space, but all of a sudden a platform space where it's like you need to sort of put down something new all of a sudden, otherwise people won't take use to it. And the other side of that is that people don't like change. So trying to then make a change that's sweeping and affects everyone's life then also becomes difficult. So I guess to some degree that's one of the issues that we've noticed now that I'm a consultant, is that there are a number of people where if the right people in the right room know about new technologies, that it can suddenly become a very large project to try and do something relatively small that could have been iterative. So, yeah.
Right, I've got beef. This is why I quit Candy Crush. Because you can't complete it, right? There's always new levels, there's always a new thing. How can I get into DevOps if I can't complete it? If you're constantly moving the goalposts and shaping me to go and do something else, I can't play a game, I can't go and win it. I need a badge. Where can I go and get the badge, please? Pick one.
I think to some degree it's having the right people in the right room to try and hear that story at the particular time. But I don't think that there is an answer. There's only stories that are out there because once you have enough knowledge for it to be dangerous, either you're up to snuff with the technology and you're up to date, or you're behind. And that's sort of the ever-changing goalpost. So there isn't a good answer in that regard, at least in my mind.
I think, you would get that reward. And so I can share a quick anecdote with you. So in my journey of DevOps in my team, and rightly to what you said, is the right mindset folks you need to make that change happen, to make that journey beautiful. We started from a place where you're literally going to laugh, and I'm heading a DevOps space, by the way, so it's very embarrassing what I'm sharing. So we started from a place when we were creating Jira tickets to do deployments and not using Jenkins at all, or any build tool for that matter. We were just doing the builds using Jenkins but not deploying them. So we had a customized deployment framework written in Bash. Someone is stacking the tickets up. I've employed 10 people who are genius, but then I was wasting their potential by asking them to stack the tickets, create the tickets in Jira, and then stack them in the framework and whatnot. However, I think it's because of the right mindset and the passionate people in my team who were so chuffed about the change that they're going to take, the journey that they're going to take now. That they just sort of dropped everything. They dropped their titles, they dropped their understanding of 9-to-5 job, about any recognition or anything. They just wanted to do the right thing, right? It took us 18 months because it was probably only my team who was very passionate about it, but the rest of the people outside, they were okay, but then they also wanted to do the delivery. So, it was not that easy to make that change happen because you're only a part of the organization. Where I'm going with all of that is that ultimately, after 18 months of a lot of hard work and a laborious process, we actually created a masterpiece in our organization, which is taking care of a lot of dependencies, all written in Jenkins DSL, 50,000 lines of code in the back end to do a very complicated CI pipeline, but by a click of a button. We did get that medal for ourselves. We were it was a proud moment for all of us. We celebrated, but then we didn't stop there, right? We became the victims of our own success. Everyone started to come to us about some of the other problems, and in 1 year time again, we were unlocking the second level, and then we again sort of achieved something. Then we got bored of it. We were like, okay, this is happening. We ate our own dog food. We were so critique about our own pipelines, and we just kept going and going and going, and still doing that. Now we're running in cloud. We have Kubernetes. We have ECS, EKS, Fargate, whatnot. But when we started 6 years back, we were really doing a very unpleasant job. Let's put it that way. But then, it's the same team, same people, and unlocked it every time, the victory, and still are very motivated to do the next level. So that's.
So you're telling me that I can't achieve and complete DevOps. It's not a thing, it's a state of mind.
Yeah. Strong mindset.
And I think, I'm deliberately playing the Piers Morgan role here tonight. That's my job. I think that it's really important to recognise that the way people think about these problems is one of the most important components of getting us right. We list out and we reel off an awful lot of technology and the things that we use to support and enable these outcomes that we're delivering. But it comes from a way of working and a way of thinking in a team that allows you to manage that level of complexity, that level of cognitive load, and still use all that new technology and be adaptable and explore. So, as much as I would like to have a badge for it, I will settle for the fact that at some points in my career, I sat in teams that did it, and I'll just have to have that warm, fuzzy feeling that I knew one time I was doing it right. So, we're agreeing that DevOps is a super, super powerful thing when harnessed properly inside an organization. We're also saying that it's quite a vague and abstract concept these days. So, given I now have fully progressed to the dark side and sit on an executive team, I am one of the people in the business. Do we think that leaders have gone cold on DevOps? Is it not the thing that people want to talk about anymore? Is it still a relevant and valid conversation to be having up to senior engineering teams and boardroom levels? I'm going to go to Lubna for that one.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I work in a very product-heavy teams, and I've always worked in very product-heavy teams. So I can tell you the number of times we've had the discussions of quality versus time trade-offs. That's just way too many times. And oftentimes the reality is, if there's a business and there are stakeholders and everyone's sort of waiting for some kind of delivery, and you have a list of things you need to do to deliver, and then there's a list of things you need to do to deliver in a scalable and a more efficient way. But when you put cost to it, it's often that the faster approach, which will get you more revenue, it kind of wins that battle. And I think it is about mindset, obviously. But what you shared earlier, actually, that was about having that mindset which got you that badge, that you were able to perform and deliver that in your team. But I think that is, in my experience, I think that is quite rare to have, that a company being very accepting of spending a lot of engineering efforts on long-term sort of that kind of thought on, okay, let's improve this process. because I work with a lot of startups as well. So there is a lot of fintechs spinning up. How many of us actually here work in a startup fintech company? So it's a few hands here. So you would probably know that in fintech, especially nowadays, there is a lot of pressure on delivering, because there are, if you don't produce that product, someone else is going to produce that product before you, and they're going to win those customers or partners or banks or however. And I think that's when, for leaders, it gets quite tricky, because they don't want to lose the business, because someone's funding that startup, and if you can't prove to them that, okay, you can actually make money and succeed and gain that many partners in that much amount of time, that's when it becomes very painful almost for the leaders to prioritize the things as perhaps they should. So yeah, do you have anything to add?
So I think at the core of it, as far as for people going cold on DevOps, I don't think so. Actually, I think with the more recent AI revelations that people have been having, one of the nice things that sort of has come out of that is that people are realizing that development practices actually apply to more than just people that would traditionally be described as developers. So I think to some degree, the people that are having those conversations, thankfully, are coming from a development field for the most part. So they're recognizing that some of the practices of DevOps do have implications to people that may not be used to writing code. That being, for example, like Zapier or other tools that are low code or no code that are coming to the forefront, which require you to still have things like source control. And if a developer makes it, or a person makes a change to a system that is an automated pipeline, having things that can test that. So I think it's actually coming more to the forefront because it's showing a whole new class of people that are now considered developers or automators some of these practices, and trying to make that even more forefront in their mind. Because if they start breaking things, then we'll just go back to the point of needing developers for everything, because the people that don't know how to code really don't know how to code. So that's, yeah.
I think there is still a strong interest in DevOps. So from a GitLab perspective, we are constantly growing. There is a high demand. And to be honest, I don't talk a lot about DevOps with partners. It's a lot more about AI and consequences, about change, how to change, help customers to change. DevOps, I think, is an accepted construct or mindset.
That's a pound in the pot for AI, thank you. So we're hearing from GitLab saying that DevOps is still very much alive. I know it is because I get 20 emails telling me how it is very alive and how I should buy it. Is it true and fair that vendors have ruined DevOps?
No.
From our other vendor?
I don't think so. I think the biggest issue with any sort of ecosystem is vendor lock-in, which now more and more we're becoming more keenly aware of. And so, not really. I think one of the issues that we're sort of running into at this point is once an organization has sort of become vendor locked at this stage, is trying to make those principles as ingrained in the company's process as possible, and sort of trying to really, I guess, own up to the decision that they've made, which may have not been made by people that should have been making those decisions, but sort of trying to use the stuff that they already have to sort of put together what their version of reality is. There are so many different ways that you can implement DevOps or any number of the technologies that are out there. But I do think that sort of understanding your own decisions and trying to critique them and modify them, because the first iteration is not going to be great. Hell, the current iteration is probably not great, and the future one ideally is better than the current iteration. So I think that's sort of where it is. The biggest issue that you run into nowadays is when vendors or any tool that you might be using change things out from underneath you, which has become very obvious in the last few weeks, months, years, etc. There isn't, there isn't a great answer out there. It's sort of trying to determine what the best options are at this point. There are certainly open source efforts to try and change what might be underlying and sort of keep it in that what's best for the community effort. But that's a really hard sell for businesses. So I don't know. I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts.
So let's say I am a business owner. I started my business, and now it's a tech something business. And I have like 10 engineers working with me right now, and I heard about a lot of these vendors, and I had their pitches, and they sent me quotations, and I got really overwhelmed by all of that. And I was like, okay, there are too many tools and too many things to do, and that's too much money as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to defer this for 2 more years, and how much code can my engineers write in these 2 years? So I'm not going to do any of that. Which is a terrible practice, by the way, and which is very bad. But whose fault is that?
Who are you asking?
Yeah. Everyone's looking at me.
Look, so I think, having sat in a service provider a few years ago and absolutely rode the cloud gravy train all the way home, I don't think you can blame vendors for monetizing buzzwords, right? Especially if we leave them so opaque and poorly defined. They're going to put their value into it. And 9 times out of 10, they make incredible tools and provide incredible services, right? They do. 9 times out of 10. I didn't say whether you were the one or not. So I think what we're seeing here is that as you create a more and more complex system, you are naturally going to see points of abstraction. Vendors have a huge part to play in putting some of those things underneath, so you haven't got to worry about those pieces and you can move on to a higher order problem set. I think that ultimately what you're seeing now is that vendors really haven't killed it. They've enabled it. They've given it gas. They've moved it all forward. Does that mean that leaders have gone cold on it? I think buzzwords have a shelf life. What you're left with is the real stuff once all the hype dies down. And that's what you see day to day in the business.
It has created the awareness, though. So I think I would rather say that vendors, because of the vendors, I think we have got more awareness on DevOps. So people who were not aware of that, at least now they know the buzzwords, and they would go to the right people to understand what actually does it mean. And then, I personally believe, and this is from my personal experience as well, you do need the sponsorship from the executive leadership for you to make that bold change in your organization. Otherwise, yes, you might still be able to do it. It would take you probably a decade or more, double the time, if not less, to to basically claim that success, to do those transformative stuff and revolutionary things that you want to, because it would be so exhausting. You would have to always back your things with numbers, which might only make sense to some people and not to the others. So I think vendors have actually made it easier for us. The next thing which I'm going to say, probably you're not going to like it, but what we do is that we take the quotations from the vendors and then basically tell our senior leadership that how we're going to do that for free. If you give us the investment and the capacity to our engineering teams to basically do that stuff. How I'm actually saving you this much of money, but then giving you better benefits, optimized flow, faster time to market, quick mean time to restore, blah, 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 by not spending any penny. So I think in a way it works for us. It works for the leaders to so I think I'm rather in much favor of vendors socializing it for everyone. So.
Just a little remark. Developing your own tools also cost money.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm biting my tongue. We could do a whole other panel on build versus buy. That is a massive question. We can do it with a beer and boxing gloves later. So, we've talked about the evolution of DevOps, right? I think, as much as we're throwing a bit of shade on it, it's a positive evolution, right? We're in a better place because I can go and spin up a Kubernetes cluster using a cloud provider rather than having to master it and write a bunch of stuff like I used to have to do at Pearson back in the early 2010s. So we're seeing a positive piece of progress, but we're also saying that DevOps as a concept started quite vague and has become a bit of a catch-all phrase. And that has allowed a space for other buzzwords to creep in. So we're seeing, and we have been seeing for a number of years, more and more references to SRE, and we've got an ex-Googler in our ranks who can surely point to whether that's a real thing or not. And we also now talk about platform engineering. We seem obsessed by always finding the new hotness and the next hype. So I wanted to go to Jason first and just say, is this the natural evolution or is this just new hype?
No, I think it certainly is the natural evolution of things. Because as more and more companies realize that they are doing things that are better for their organization, they then get asked from either developers or people outside of development, what if we just did X, Y, and Z? And then that falls its way back to someone earlier in the pipeline. And people asking those questions and sort of pushing the rest of the team is really quite natural and important, because what do you wish? You wish for it to be more efficient. And once you become efficient, how do you become more efficient from there? Similarly, I think one of the things that SRE sort of brought to the forefront of DevOps is leaning into the ops side, but from more of a business case of how do we make sure that people are looped into decisions that are being made? How do we make observability and reliability much more forefront of people's minds? It's also sort of the shift from the system can never be down to the system has 99.99% availability, and sort of taking those handcuffs that never really should have been in place in the first spot, but sort of making it more obvious and be like, this as an organization is how we're moving in a certain direction. So I think, as every organization sort of figures out their own footing with that and what they want to make of it, it all sort of leads from one spot into the next. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is up to every organization to manage their workload and sort of what tools do they have and what do they need. With Google, it was quite interesting when I actually started at Google. I was the software engineer, the SUI, and I learned that there was this other group of people called SREs, and the way it works is you just kind of deploy the code and you throw it on the other side of the fence and wish them good luck with it. But that only works because Google, the monorepo and the tools that have been built over past few years by the most talented people in the world are incredible. There's this system called Blaze, and then there's this, which is the build tool, and there's Borg, and loads of them, which works at the scale Google works on. Now, if someone else tries to create all of them in-house, that A, might not be a best use of their time, and B, might not even be beneficial, because they'll constantly be chasing up on different functionality that they could easily get from a vendor-based tool. So yeah, it really depends on the company. On that note, there is a team at Google, or there was a team at Google called Flakes, Does anyone have any idea what that might mean? What do they do in addition to eating ice cream from Google Kitchens? Any guesses? Wild guess. Oh, I hear nothing. Come on, I need one answer.
Drinking water.
Water. So the Flakes team's job is actually to fix flaky tests. There's an entire team dedicated to the fact that tests are flaky and how to fix them and how things go. But I can't imagine any other company in the world who would dedicate a team for that particular area. So yeah.
Okay, so we're saying that SRE and platform engineering, they're the new things, but Jason's telling me that this is all just a natural evolution and people are finding their place in things. 10, 15 years ago, I could have come up with some really robust and quite archaic ways for managing incident, change, problem, and I could have just chosen not to call it ITIL, but it would have been the same thing. Why is this industry so obsessed with putting a label on stuff?
Well, I feel like at this point we've sort of gotten into certification and audit hell, and it's always been there, but I think it's become more prevalent. So similarly, as it's at least in the United States, we have like SOC 2 audits, Sarbanes-Oxley, and a number of ISO certifications that are out there that sort of have these controls in place. I think that's why, to some degree, it's become so much to the forefront, because there is a lot of guardrails around organizational reliability. Similarly, it's also easier to hire people if they have certifications in certain fields. A lot of things that are out there are just checking boxes, and I think that's always been the case and will continue to be. But yeah.
I think that's where it's getting a bit, we're falling through the cracks of a broken foundation. So I think SRE, again, I also feel that it's an extension to DevOps. It just sort of probably focuses on some specialized frameworks where we're looking after reliability and the operability of our applications and understanding that how much error budget do we have. And then in order for us to understand the error budget and do something about it, it basically enforces us to talk to development teams. And then development teams can actually take more risks. They can actually say, okay, I can now release in a new feature because I do have a 0.1% of error budget. That means if my application goes down for like a couple hours, then a couple hours, then I should still be fine, and my features would still be, shining, in production. So I think that's why it's an extension. However, what I've also seen is that now there are like batons being passed on from like devs to DevOps, from DevOps to SRE, from SRE to Ops still, and then there is some application support team as well who are actually synonymous to SREs, but they're not SREs. So there's more handoffs being done to do exactly the thing. If you had done DevOps right, then you shouldn't have been able to,
I can't leave the opportunity to dig this in then. So the whole purpose of DevOps was to break down silos, and we've resulted in creating more silos. Christoph, what the fuck?
That's part of life. It's a constant challenge.
Anyone want to go on silos?
I guess yes. I mean, silos is like the more like deeper part of it. I think there is a bit of a shallow explanation or my observation as well regarding all these different fields or like buckets of DevOps, which is, I think people have this psyche that a lot of people like titles and different titles attract different people. So if you offer the exact same role and call them DevOps engineer versus call them something like cloud expert or cloud engineer or platform engineer, that actually attracts more people, and people like to work on those titles a bit more as well. So although that's very superficial and maybe it's not really targeting the creation of silos or removing the silos, but I think that's just something I've seen, that people get more attracted to different role titles as well.
Yeah, and you get to game those buzzwords as well. So the kind of CVs that we now get with like everything, all the keywords, everything literally possible in the world is now being in the CVs. But when you ask them if you have done any of that, no, there's another team who does it, but then I basically hand off it to them, you know, and then they take care of it. So I think that's the anti-pattern, of course. But then if you do get the core concepts right, and there is someone higher up in your organization who understands the basic concept of it, it becomes a responsibility to rather blur the lines between those silos and don't let the walls go thicker, and then create just one function which enables and empowers other engineering teams. You know, that's the crux of it.
Wonderful. So I think what we're hearing is that the landscape has naturally got more complicated. You know, the cognitive load has increased, and we're seeing that being spread across more and more teams. That's a normal organizational reaction to complexity. And you see this playing through today with the emergence of team topologies being one of the must-read books at the moment, looking at the patterns and structures for how to put all these teams together in flows and streams that allow you to still create value. So the world is adapting into seeing how you can put multiple teams together and still deliver the outcomes that originally just shoving dev and ops in a room would have got you. It's moved on a little bit more. But we're also seeing that there is a never-ending stream of new buzzwords and new labels, and that's part of the price of admission for working in the technology industry in 2023. And I'm lucky because I don't spend much time coding anymore and I haven't got to worry about it quite as much. But for someone trying to build a career in this space right now, wondering which of the 15,000 different buzzwords you should put in your 5 taglines on LinkedIn can be a really difficult thing, because depending on what the guys at Linux Recruit are searching for, you might go in one search and not in another. So given this shifting sands of buzzwords, I'm going to ask our esteemed panel here, how do you stand out to a recruiter trying to develop your career in this world?
I think the key thing is to have a story, to be able to tell a story, why you started with this or that, and why you evolved in some direction. So I think it's a lot of having a good story about your career.
I would agree with that. The other side of that is also, where do you want to go with your own career? At least in my own background, I come from a very ops-heavy side. I've been doing dev for about 15 years, on and off, and it's been an interesting journey, but I've also recognized that my place in an organization's role is dealing in specifically reliability and trying to make things consistent. And I think in my particular case, that's just the niche that I've particularly found. I find it interesting to deal in observability. I find it interesting to deal with the business side of that. And there are a number of titles out there, and I think the biggest thing is figuring out what your niche should be. That just happens to be mine. But also leaning into that and being like, okay, so I understand the need to move fast and break things from the development side, but I also understand the business implications of if something goes down, and sort of leaning into, I can market myself in a particular way to then move an organization in the way that they are interested in. Because if you're trying to push something in an organization that doesn't share the same values that you do, yeah, it's probably setting yourself up for failure even if you get a job early on. So something to keep in mind.
I like the word journey. I think that's important. And I started with the journey, it's about the journey, not the destination. I think in the beginning of your career, you should focus on the journey. You will find your niche, and then it's about, okay, adapt to the change. Change is part of life. I think we talked so much about change, evolving, progress. Make it your main goal, evolve, progressing. That's important. Sorry.
I was just going to add that, yeah, recruiters need to find you on LinkedIn or however, but the problem is recruiters also have little idea on what they're looking for. Even companies have little ideas on what they want. I was having this discussion today that once you join a company in this area, it's like the company gives you 6 weeks to figure out what your job is as your first assignment. So it is quite tricky. I think it's a evolving field. But yeah, I think it is very tricky. Even if you kind of know where you want to go, but you don't know if you're getting that in that company that you're going to. I think going back to culture, I think that is one thing that is, for me at least, set in stone, that this is something that is important. And if the company has that culture of change or growth or wanting to do things right, I think that's where an individual can really thrive, especially someone who wants to build in that area or is passionate about in that area as well.
Yeah, I agree actually. Yeah, I would say developer background is crucial for everyone basically to step up or to do anything that you want to. So if I were a new fresh, someone who has just graduated, I think I would try to understand what is the problem that I would love to solve. But also back it up with like a very strong coding skills as a general principle, I would say. Keep learning and sort of keep a tab on the new technologies. It's not always about buzzwords. It does make you, forces you to learn new things as well. So I mean, I started as a software configuration engineer. Do you remember that term? That was like pre-DevOps, by the way. And the problem that I was trying to solve is that I always used to hear from developers that we have done our coding, and test team, again, another silo would say we have tested it and still we missed the release deadlines. And I was like, why did that happen? And then I figured out actually it was because there was a merge hell in the end, because they were not using trunk-based development for that matter, right? And they were basically, they spent 4 or 5 days just fixing the merge issues at the end. So, and this is something I wanted to solve back then when I was just a graduate. And I'm like, okay, but the whole branching strategy, blah, blah, blah. And that small subject just sort of enabled me to learn more about that space, which eventually turned up to be DevOps and build and continuous integration, because I kept on finding one problem after another in that journey. And then, that would be one thing I would say. Just keep your, the roots should be, if you're a developer, I think you would never go out of job, I'd say, in a way.
Well, we can bring that one up in our next panel about AI and GPT, can't we? Oops, I'll put the money in the jar. So look, I think, it's a fool's errand to go and chase buzzwords on your CV. You know that part of the gig being in technology in 2023 is being adaptable to learn new technologies. Demonstrating that ability to learn is more valuable to a future employer than the things you've learned historically. I also think if we're going full circle to OG DevOps and we talk about that kind of CAMS acronym, the C and the S are important. So having the self-awareness as an individual to understand how you can bring your strengths to bear within a given culture is absolutely vital. But also having the ability to share what you know with others is an absolute game changer. I used to say to members of my team when I was running software teams, it's no point having a brain the size of a planet if you can't share your knowledge with other people. So those are the things that stand out. Having all the latest buzzwords and technologies in your CVs tends not to make a difference. The way people screen CVs these days have got smarter. It's about showing those soft skills that make you a differentiated person versus the 25 other people that have got experience in that technology. It's a tough gig though. The panel are here to help you with your own development journeys. Anything this and the community can do to help, you should reach out and ask. And that concludes our panel. So what I'd like you all to do is join me in giving a very round of applause of thank you to Jason, to Rashi, to Lubna and to Christoph.